Hey, what's up? It's Rainer from youtube.com/DeleteTheCube, and as quite many people were interested in how I created and how much work went into my entry for the Indy Mogul's 10-second VFX competition, so I decided to create this breakdown video going over the main aspects of the visual effects. Things first, the backplate was filmed with my Canon 500D or T1i if you live in America, and one downside for using that camera is that it has full HD video, but it's only at 20 FPS. Fortunately, with the finished result, you couldn't really see any jerky movement. Of course, in order to match 3D elements to the backplate, the shot needs to be match moved, and therefore I set the shutter speed quite quick, like 1/350th of a second. Match moving, and like all the other 3D related work, was done in a 3D package called Blender, which is free and open source, by the way. Match moving done using the built-in match mover, and the Blender's version used was 2.63, and a little bit of unofficial builds from graphical.org. Before importing the footage into Blender, I rendered it into a JPEG sequence from After Effects. It's just a device to use image sequences in trackers rather than video files. For both shots, I did supervised tracking, which means that 2D trackers were tracked manually. It gave me a solve error around half a pixel for both of the plates. That's totally usable without any sliding visible. Also, make sure to set the memory cache limit higher to be able to cache all the frames into the memory if you're using Blender. Then, in a different blend file, I modeled and textured the traffic sign, which is quite straightforward polymodeling. There's nothing too special about that. Then I added all the sign species into a group, and I appended that group into the file with match moving already completed. When 3D models were in place, I created a breakaway piece and underground parts, which would be visible as the breakaway piece would fly away. The flying chunk was modeled by making a circle with loads of vertices and using the proportional editing tool with randomness value. At first I thought of having the first shot full CGI, because probably the most difficult challenge with such VFX is to blend the environment with the 3D objects. The real asphalt's connection to the 3D asphalt needed to be seamless. At first I fiddled around with some ideas with UV projection modifiers, but using just project from view UV setup paid off. There's a cool little button in the movie clip editor which sets up foreground and background render layers and delivers a shadow and ambient collision pass from the background. So I used that, and it set up this simple node setup which I was able to use as a basis for compositing. I also had to edit the background element and add a little bit of detail to it in order to bend the shadow onto the pavement. Also, the same shaped hole was needed to be cut into the background element, which is used only to get shadow and ambient occlusion data in order to avoid overlapping faces. The CG ground is in the same location in 3D space as the foreground element. At first I had some problems with shadows because the CG ground was casting a shadow onto the background element before it started to raise. Turning off traceable to remove it from ray tracing calculations would work, but cutting the hole into the background element was the easiest way to do it. For compositing, I also rendered an object index pass for underground hole and the pole. Then I used that ID index as a factor value for RGB curves to change the tonality of just these two objects alone. Then the scene was rendered out into a PNG sequence and ready for some additional work in After Effects. Oh, and also before jumping into After Effects, I saved the camera move and tracking markers into an .jgx script file, so I can have the same 3D camera inside After Effects as well. In After Effects I hid most of the tracking markers with the Shy Layers option to limit visual cluster and imported a crack texture from cgtextures.com. Then I copied location information from one of the markers on the ground and pasted that into the position slot of the texture. I duplicated the same texture a couple of times again and animated masks revealing the cracks. Also, in the beginning I added a live action element of rock particles flying upwards. The other shot was more or less done with similar techniques. One difference was that I also had a moving null object exported through the script file that helped to add a dusty rubble element to the ground piece. By the way, I had to rotate that element so it kept its orientation towards the ground. I could have probably parented only the position of that layer, but it was an easy fix. There are also some ground pieces falling, which were emitted from a particle system in Blender. And another composition to put both of the shots together, do a little more color correction, grading, vignette, and some time remapping to fix a slightly annoying cut between the shots. I layered some sound effects from freesound.org and the piece was completed. So thanks everyone for watching, and if you have some more questions about this piece, make sure to leave a comment below and I'll see you guys later.